man in seat 4B. The morning sky over Los Angeles was painted in soft blue and gold, as Flight 770 to New York prepared for takeoff. Passengers lined up, some with groggy eyes, and others with busy fingers still tapping away on phones. But in the center of it all, unnoticed, walked a man who didn't try to stand out. He wore a worn black cap, faded jeans, and a hoodie zipped halfway up. He moved with quiet steps and carried no entourage. The only clue to who he was came from the gentle nods and warm smiles he gave the staff as he passed them by. It was Keanu Reeves. He was tired but calm, hoping for a peaceful flight to think, read, and maybe rest a little. No first class. No VIP treatment. Just a regular seat among regular people like he always preferred. He took his seat in row 4B near the aisle and placed his small bag under the seat in front of him. The flight wasn't even halfway boarded when a man in a loud designer suit walked down the aisle, grumbling already. "Move!" the man barked at the elderly couple struggling with their carry-on ahead of him. "Unbelievable. Economy class is like a zoo," he kept muttering as he approached row 4. Keanu offered a polite smile and moved slightly to let the man pass. The man gave him a once-over, scoffed, and slid into 4A right beside him. "Didn't expect to be stuck beside some sweaty gym guy," the man said with a sneer. Keanu didn't reply. He had learned long ago not to feed the fire. Instead, he turned toward the window and tried to disappear into his thoughts. As the final passengers boarded, a young flight attendant named Emily walked down the aisle. She looked new, maybe in her mid-20s, but she had a kindness in her eyes that made passengers feel at ease. She welcomed people with warmth, even the ones who didn't return her smile. When she reached row 4, her gaze paused for just a second on Keanu, her lips twitching into a soft smile of recognition. But she didn't say anything. She respected his space. Minutes later, the plane began to taxi. Phones were turned to airplane mode, seatbelts clicked, and engines hummed louder. The man in 4A took out a laptop, then rang the bell for service even before the plane left the ground. "Can I get coffee?" he demanded. "Sir," Emily said gently, "we'll begin beverage service after we're in the air." He rolled his eyes and muttered something under his breath. Keanu glanced at him briefly but said nothing. When the flight finally leveled at cruising altitude, Emily came down the aisle with the beverage cart. The man in 4A waved his hand dramatically. "Finally," he said. "Black coffee, extra hot, and don't mess it up." She gave him the coffee, smiled softly, and then turned to Keanu. "Tea, please," he said quietly. Emily handed him a small cup with steady hands. "Earl Grey, okay?" "Perfect," he replied. But then it happened. As Emily turned to serve the next row, the man in 4A leaned forward carelessly with his laptop, knocking his tray. The full cup of steaming black coffee tipped directly onto Keanu's head and shoulders. A shocked gasp swept through the cabin. The man didn't apologize. Instead, he laughed. "Whoops, maybe wear better clothes next time." Keanu froze. The burning heat from the coffee seeped through his hoodie. A few nearby passengers stood to offer napkins. Emily rushed back, eyes wide. "Oh my God," she said, pulling tissues and cold water from the cart. "Sir, are you hurt?" Keanu blinked away the sting and smiled faintly. "I'm okay." But Emily wasn't. Her hands shook as she tried to help him clean up. She turned to the man who caused it. "Sir, that was unacceptable," she said, her voice firm but respectful. "It was an accident," the man said with a smirk. "Besides, he looks fine." Emily's face changed. She looked down at Keanu, who now had wet stains all over his back and shoulders. His hoodie was ruined, but his expression remained calm. "I'll bring you a clean towel," she said softly. "Please give me a moment." As she walked briskly toward the front, whispers filled the air. Someone in row 5 whispered to their partner, "That's Keanu Reeves." The name rippled through the cabin like a secret wind, but Keanu didn't act like a star. He quietly removed his hoodie, revealing a simple black t-shirt beneath. His hair was damp. He patted himself with napkins and offered them back to the woman across the aisle who had handed him hers. "Thank you," he said gently. The woman nodded, eyes wide. Emily returned with a warm towel and a fresh bottle of water. "I'm so sorry, sir. Please, if you're cold, I can bring a blanket. And, I've already reported the incident to the supervisor on board." Keanu looked her in the eye and said something that would be repeated on social media later, when the full story came out. "It's not your fault. You did the right thing." But what happened next wasn't just about spilled coffee, because this flight was about to take a turn that no one saw coming. It started with a sudden drop in altitude. A sharp jolt rocked the plane, and the fasten seatbelt sign lit up. "Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats immediately." The captain's voice crackled. "We're experiencing unexpected turbulence." Passengers grabbed armrests, some screamed quietly. Emily ran down the aisle to ensure everyone was secured. The rude man in 4A began to panic. "What's happening? Are we crashing?" "Do something." Keanu remained calm, helping the woman next to him with her seatbelt, speaking softly to ease her fear. The plane rattled violently again. Emily reached their row, holding onto the seatbacks. "We're okay," she assured everyone. "We're going to be fine." But just as she turned to move forward, a loose overhead bin swung open above row 4. Without thinking, Keanu rose slightly, one arm shielding Emily's head just as a heavy laptop bag tumbled out. It hit his arm, not hers. A loud thud. Then silence. Emily looked up at him, shocked. You protected me." "Reflex," he said with a half smile. "You've been protecting everyone else." For the rest of the flight, Keanu sat with his arm resting in a sling Emily fashioned from a scarf. Passengers whispered, stared. Some even clapped quietly when the turbulence passed, but Keanu never asked for attention. And the man in 4A? He went completely silent. He didn't even look at Keanu again, because somewhere deep inside, even he knew. He'd been seen, not just by a few passengers, but by the world. And the flight wasn't over yet. Whispers in the air, the plane had calmed, but the air inside was still thick with unspoken emotions. Somewhere over Colorado, Flight 770 floated steady again, but the hearts of those on board were still rattling like the overhead bins had just minutes before. Eyes that once looked forward or down at their screens now kept drifting to row 4B, where something strange had happened. A man had spilled hot coffee on a stranger. A stranger had protected a flight attendant during turbulence, and now that same stranger sat quietly with a makeshift sling around his arm, his face calm, his eyes focused out the window, as if nothing happened. But people were whispering. One woman mouthed to her husband, "That's Keanu Reeves, right?" A teenager 3 rows back had already typed it into a group chat. "Guys, I swear Keanu Reeves is on my flight and some jerk threw coffee on him." It wouldn't take long for the internet to catch on. But for now, in the quiet cabin, something more important was happening. Emily, the young flight attendant with soft brown eyes, stepped forward again. She carried a new hoodie from the plane's emergency comfort supply. It wasn't glamorous, just navy blue with the airline's logo on the chest, but it was clean and warm. "Here," she said, offering it. "You shouldn't sit there wet and cold." Keanu looked at her, his arm still aching from the blow. He took the hoodie gently and smiled. "Thank you, Emily." Her heart skipped slightly. "You remember my name? You were the only one who apologized for something that wasn't your fault," he said softly. "That sticks with me." Emily's lips parted, but no words came out. She wasn't used to being noticed like this. Not by someone like him. Not by anyone, really. Keanu slipped the hoodie over his t-shirt carefully, trying not to move his injured arm too much. The pain was dull but deep. He had taken worse hits in training. But this wasn't a film. This was real. As he adjusted the fabric, he saw the man in 4A watching from the corner of his eye. The man looked uncomfortable now, like someone who knew a camera was finally on him after years of behaving badly. The man cleared his throat. "Look, about earlier," he started. Keanu turned slightly toward him, expression unreadable. "I mean, it was an accident. I didn't mean to—" "You meant to laugh," Keanu interrupted gently. "That part wasn't an accident." The man opened his mouth, then shut it, His face turned slightly red, and he looked away, shrinking into his expensive suit like it couldn't shield him anymore. The cabin had fallen quiet. People were listening, pretending they weren't. Emily stepped between them, sensing the tension. "Can I get either of you something to eat? Maybe tea or pain relief?" Keanu nodded. Tea would be nice. But he didn't ask for pain relief, because he wasn't worried about the arm, he was worried about something else. A few moments later, as Emily walked back with a tray of drinks, she stopped beside a middle-aged woman in 5A who had been weeping quietly into her scarf. Her son was next to her, maybe 10 years old, skinny, silent, scared. "Ma'am," Emily said gently, "is everything okay?" The woman hesitated, eyes wet. "We're fine, thank you." Keanu had turned slightly. He had noticed them too. During the turbulence, the boy had clutched his mother's hand like he was holding on to the world itself. "You sure?" Emily asked softly. "You've been crying for a while." The woman gave a broken smile. "My husband passed 2 days ago. We're flying back from the hospital. I didn't want to take this flight, but it was the only one we could afford." Keanu stood slowly. Passengers turned again. "May I sit with you for a moment?" he asked the woman. She blinked in surprise. "You don't have to." "I want to." He switched seats with a man in 5B who happily agreed. Keanu sat beside the grieving woman and her son, his presence instantly softening the weight in the air. "I'm so sorry for your loss," he said quietly. She nodded, trembling slightly. He was young, heart condition. "We didn't see it coming." The boy looked up at Keanu but didn't speak. His hands were in his lap, fidgeting with the edges of his sleeves. "I lost my father when I was very young," Keanu said. "And my best friend. And my partner. Grief is a shadow, but it can't block all the light." The woman covered her mouth as tears came again. But this time they were not only tears of sorrow. They were tears of being seen, understood. Keanu looked down at the boy. "What's your name?" "Lucas," the boy whispered. Keanu smiled. "That's a strong name." Lucas looked away, shy but comforted. Keanu reached into the pocket of the hoodie Emily had given him and pulled out a small notebook. He flipped through it and tore out a page. He handed it to Lucas. On it in simple pen was a short quote. "Bravery is being scared and standing anyway." Lucas looked at it like it was a golden ticket. His fingers gripped it tightly. Keanu stood up slowly, the sling pressing into his shoulder, and nodded toward Emily. "He's going to be someone special," he said. Emily smiled, heart swelling. He returned to his seat beside the man in 4A, who now looked even smaller than before. Silence hung between them for a minute until the man finally blurted out, "Why are you like this?" Keanu turned his head, puzzled. "You're famous. Rich. People worship you. Why are you still sitting in coach, letting people spill things on you? Comforting strangers?" Keanu thought for a moment, then answered in a voice just above a whisper, "Because when people forget they're human, it's up to someone else to remind them." The man didn't reply, but his eyes dropped, and for once he looked ashamed. Not long after, the captain made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're preparing to begin our descent into New York. Please fasten your seatbelts." The city of lights and towers waited below. But the real story was happening at 30,000 feet, inside a steel bird full of hearts beginning to beat a little differently. And the story wasn't over, because someone had recorded the entire coffee incident, and someone else had filmed Keanu comforting the grieving mother, and both videos were now being uploaded. The world had no idea what it was about to wake up to. The world starts watching by the time Flight 770 touched down at JFK Airport. The sun had dipped low behind the skyline, casting long golden streaks over the city. Passengers stood to grab their bags, stretch their legs, and make phone calls. But on this flight, no one rushed to leave. Row 4 had become something of a quiet landmark. Strangers who hadn't spoken in hours were now sharing glances, silent nods, and knowing smiles. It was more than just witnessing a celebrity. It was witnessing something rare. Humility in power, grace in pain, and kindness when it wasn't owed. Keanu Reeves sat still, his injured arm resting quietly in the makeshift sling. Beside him, the once rude passenger now sat in awkward silence. No longer inflated by pride. And behind them, a boy named Lucas still held a note that he would never lose for the rest of his life. Emily returned once more, this time not as a server, but as a quiet protector. "We'll be at the gate in a few minutes," she said softly. "Is there anything else I can do for you?" Keanu smiled. "You've done enough." But as the cabin doors opened and the passengers began to exit, the unexpected started happening. A man in first class was waiting by the gate tunnel. He held his phone up, screen glowing. He had filmed the coffee incident hours earlier. He looked at Keanu with awe and spoke into the camera. This man got drenched in boiling coffee, didn't get mad, and then saved a flight attendant from a falling bag. And yes, that man is Keanu Reeves. A young woman posted a clip of Keanu comforting the grieving mother, and then came the storm. Within 40 minutes, the hashtags began trending. Keanu Reeves, midair, miracle, humble Keanu, coffee, incident, hero news. Outlets picked it up. Twitter exploded. TikTok edits with dramatic music showed him shielding Emily in slow motion. Instagram pages with millions of followers reshared the moment he handed Lucas the handwritten note. Keanu didn't know any of this yet. He walked through the terminal quietly, his cap back on, his hoodie hiding the now famous navy blue airline logo. A driver waited near the exit with a small sign that said, "Mr. K." Keanu nodded and followed him to a quiet black car parked outside. As they drove, his phone buzzed again and again. Text messages from people he hadn't spoken to in months. Calls from his agent. Even a short message from Sandra Bullock that simply said, "You've done it again, haven't you?" Keanu chuckled softly and turned the phone over, screen facing down. But Emily? Her phone was still in airplane mode. When she turned it on during her break in the staff lounge, it nearly froze from the flood of notifications. Messages from friends. Missed calls. Social media tags. One friend sent a screenshot. "Is this really you?" She clicked the link. There she was, on camera, ducking her head as a bag fell, only to be shielded by Keanu's arm. She dropped the phone, hands covering her mouth. "Oh my God." Another attendant peeked over. "Emily, you're going viral." Her heart pounded. This wasn't what she expected. She had just wanted to protect a passenger and keep things calm. She never thought anyone would notice, let alone the entire internet. As she sat back down overwhelmed, a quiet voice from her supervisor interrupted. "Emily," he said, holding a phone to his ear. "Head office wants to talk to you. Now." She stood quickly. "Am I in trouble?" "Just take the call." Meanwhile, in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, Lucas sat on the floor, still holding the note Keanu gave him. His mom sat on the edge of the bed, eyes red from crying, but smiling for the first time in days. The boy had been silent the entire cab ride home. But now, he spoke. "Mom," he said quietly, "I want to be brave like him." She nodded, tears rising again. "You already are." He carefully folded the note, walked over to the fridge and placed it under a small magnet shaped like a star. Outside, the city kept moving like nothing had changed. But inside this small apartment, everything had, later that night. Keanu sat, alone in his home. His injured arm now properly wrapped, the pain slightly duller but the weight of the day heavier. He read a few headlines, smiled at the exaggeration in some of them, but paused when he saw one in particular. Actor or angel? How Keanu Reeves reminded the world what kindness looks like at 30,000 feet. He exhaled deeply. To him, it wasn't about being kind in public. It was about being kind when no one was supposed to be watching. That's why it mattered. But now, everyone was watching. And something strange was happening. Because while the internet was talking about Keanu, it also started talking about Emily. People demanded that the airline honor her, reward her, promote her. Even strangers were donating money to a fund someone had started in her name. The post read, "She stayed calm. She protected a passenger. She didn't freeze." Let's give back to the one who gave everything. And within hours, that fund crossed $50,000. Emily was overwhelmed. She tried to close the page, but the donors wouldn't stop. Messages poured in. Thank you for being brave. My daughter wants to be a flight attendant because of you. You made us believe again. The airline had no choice. The next morning, they held a press conference. They offered Emily a full-time promotion, doubled her pay, and announced she'd be honored with the first-ever Passenger Hero Award. But behind the scenes, Keanu had done more. He had asked for her personnel file. Not to invade, just to understand who she was. He found out she had been working extra shifts to support her mom's cancer treatment. And quietly, without announcement, he paid off her mother's entire medical debt through an anonymous donation. No one knew. Not even Emily. Not yet. But someone else did. Someone who had been silent since the plane landed. The man from 4A. He had gone back to his high-rise office, poured a drink, and stared at himself in the mirror. What he saw wasn't success. It was a man who laughed at another's pain, who mocked kindness, who shrank in the presence of grace. He closed his laptop and picked up his phone, and for the first time in years, he called his mother. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, he told her, for everything. Because sometimes, one moment, one flight, one person can change you, and the world had only seen the beginning of what this flight would become. Ripple through the sky. It had been 3 days since Flight 770 landed in New York, but the aftershock hadn't faded. It had only grown louder. The video of Keanu Reeves being drenched in coffee had already reached 12 million views. The clip of him shielding Emily during turbulence was being shown on morning talk shows around the world. Hashtags filled with messages of admiration and gratitude were now trending in multiple countries. But what moved people most wasn't the fame. It wasn't the headlines. It was the raw humanity of it all. A grieving mother comforted by a stranger. A quiet boy holding onto a handwritten note like it was gold. A young flight attendant finding her courage in front of the world. And a man, once, the target of humiliation, who chose compassion over anger. Keanu Reeves, who had returned to his quiet life in Los Angeles, watched all of this unfold with both disbelief and care. He wasn't new to being in the spotlight, but this time felt different. This wasn't about his movies or red carpet interviews. This was about how a quiet moment of kindness had become something so much bigger. His phone buzzed again. It was a message from Emily. Emily, I still don't understand how this all happened. Thank you for what you did. And thank you for reminding me that being kind isn't small. Keanu smiled. He didn't reply right away. Instead, he sat on his porch watching the sun dip low, casting long shadows across his yard. The sling was still on his arm, but the pain had faded. What hadn't faded was the way Lucas had looked at him. Like he mattered. Like being good still meant something. In Brooklyn, Lucas sat in his school cafeteria, a little nervous, his lunch untouched. He had never liked attention, and now everyone knew what happened. His classmates whispered about him. Some pointed. A few were kind. Most were just curious, but Lucas wasn't thinking about them. He kept reading the note Keanu gave him, the words already memorized. Bravery is being scared and standing anyway. A teacher walked over and knelt beside him. Lucas, she said softly, we heard about what happened, and your story touched us. A few of the staff spoke with the school board, and we want to do something special. He looked up, unsure what she meant. Next week, you're going to stand in front of the school and read that note. You're going to teach them what bravery really looks like. His stomach dropped. I can't. You can, she said, smiling. And you won't be alone. Lucas's mom stood at the doorway of the cafeteria, holding a small camera. We'll all be there, she whispered. Back at the airline headquarters, Emily stood nervously outside, a large glass room. She had been invited to speak to the board, but she didn't know why. All she knew was that her hands were shaking. When she entered, the entire board stood up. Miss Emily, the director said, you've done something extraordinary. You not only handled a dangerous situation with calm and skill, but you also inspired the nation. She nodded, unsure what to say. We've reviewed your service record. Your actions during Flight 770 were not your first act of courage. We've found multiple reports of you going above and beyond for passengers. And, because of that, he slid an envelope across the table. We're promoting you to lead cabin trainer for our entire region, effective immediately, and we want you to help us redesign how we train new flight attendants. From now on, we want more people like you in the skies. Emily blinked, tears forming. I don't know what to say. Just say you'll keep being who you are. Meanwhile, the man from Seat 4A, Bradley Turner, a high-profile real estate broker, was sitting across from a journalist in a quiet coffee shop in downtown Manhattan. He hadn't spoken to the press in years, but now he had requested this interview himself. I was awful, Bradley said. I was rude, arrogant, disrespectful, and I didn't care about anyone but myself. The journalist raised an eyebrow. Why admit it now? Because the moment he looked at me after the coffee spilled, Bradley said slowly, I realized I'd become someone I never wanted to be. And then he shielded that woman from a falling bag. And it hit me. The guy I mocked was the only one on that flight being human. He handed the journalist a check. This is a donation to a grief counseling center, he said, in memory of a man I never met, and in honor of the woman and boy on that flight. I never got their names, but they changed my life. The story went viral the next morning. Man who mocked Keanu Reeves makes a $100K donation after midair incident. The world responded with cautious hope. Some still criticized him. Others said it was performative. But a few said something softer. Maybe people really can change. By Friday morning, Keanu received a letter at his home. Not an email. A handwritten letter, carefully sealed, with a return address from Brooklyn. He opened it slowly. Inside was a drawing of a stick figure in a hoodie standing next to a smaller stick figure with a big smile. Above them, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for saving my mom. You're my hero." It was signed. Lucas. Keanu stared at it for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. Hi, Emily. Do you know how to reach the family? From row 5? I want to do something. The next day, Lucas and his mom heard a knock at their apartment door. She opened it slowly, and standing there, holding a small bag and a gentle smile, was Keanu Reeves. Lucas froze. Thought I'd stop by, Keanu said. Wanted to give you something. He handed Lucas the bag. Inside was a real movie stunt jacket from one of his films, a signed copy of a graphic novel, and a small sealed envelope. Lucas opened the envelope and found a certificate. Lucas, for bravery, kindness, and strength in the face of sadness, I name you an honorary guardian of flight. 770, Lucas hugged. Him, not because he was a celebrity, but because he was the only person who had made him feel stronger after his world had fallen apart. A week later, Flight 770 had its own tribute page on the airline's website. It read, On one flight, between 2 cities, strangers reminded us that kindness still flies. Below it were the photos of Keanu, Emily, Lucas, and even Bradley Turner, each with a short message, each reminding the world that one moment, one action, can change everything. But the story wasn't over, because Keanu had one more surprise planned, and this time, it would be for someone who thought no one saw her at all. The surprise at gate. So like a soft rain tapped the glass windows at JFK Airport as travelers moved through the terminal, dragging suitcases and sipping coffee. It had been 2 weeks since Flight 770, but people were still talking about it like it happened yesterday. Some passengers now asked for seat 4B on purpose. Others wore shirts that said, "Kindness still flies." Employees at the airline called it the Keanu flight in hushed admiration. But today, Gate 22 was unusually busy. Cameras were being set up. Flight attendants in neatly pressed uniforms stood at attention. Even the airline CEO had shown up, dressed casually but with a nervous smile. Behind the scenes, Emily stood near a service door, confused and trying not to fidget with her tie. "Why am I here?" she asked again. A senior manager chuckled. "Just wait. She didn't know that Keanu was already in the building. He had entered quietly through a back entrance wearing a beanie and sunglasses. But today, he wasn't here as a passenger. He was here with a mission. He carried no luggage, just a small folder in one hand and something hidden beneath his coat. A few airport staff recognized him, but none approached. They had seen the footage, like the rest of the world. And in their eyes, he wasn't just a star. He was a reminder of what people could be. As he reached the restricted corridor behind Gate 22, a crew member whispered into a headset, "He's here." Inside the lounge, Emily was just about to ask again what was going on when the door opened and Keanu walked in. She blinked. "Mr. Reeves?" "Keanu," he smiled. "Always Keanu." He walked up to her slowly, then pulled out the folder. "A few days ago, I made a call," he said. "I asked your airline if they would let me do something that meant more to me than just another thank you post." He opened the folder and handed her a single sheet of paper. It was an official document stamped and signed. "Flight 770 Foundation," she read aloud. "You inspired something," Keanu said. "So we created a program. It'll sponsor training, education, and emergency support for flight attendants in need. It'll be funded by donations, airline partnerships, and a bit of my own money. And we've named you as its first ambassador." Emily's hands began to tremble. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Don't say anything." He smiled. "Just keep being who you are." Before she could respond, the door behind them opened. Reporters stepped inside, followed by airline executives and cameras. A woman with a microphone stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "today we honor not just a moment that went viral, but a movement of compassion that started at 30,000 feet. Keanu Reeves reminded us what quiet courage looks like. And Emily, our own cabin crew hero, showed the world that even in fear, kindness leads." Emily was frozen in place as the CEO came forward with a small velvet box. "Emily," he said, "it is our honor to present you with the first ever Wings of Humanity Award. This is not just for saving a moment, but for changing lives. Starting with one man in 4B. The room clapped. Not the polite corporate kind. It was real, from the heart. Tears filled Emily's eyes as she accepted the award. Keanu leaned close and said softly, "The world needs more people like you." She looked at him, unable to speak. But her eyes said everything. And yet, Keanu wasn't finished. He turned to the cameras and surprised even the airline staff. "I'd like to donate an extra $100,000 to the foundation," he said calmly. "But not in my name. In hers." The crowd gasped. Emily stepped back, shaking her head. "You can't." "I already did," he smiled. "This is your story too." Meanwhile, in a small school in Brooklyn, Lucas stood nervously on stage. Students filled the auditorium, whispering and waiting. The principal adjusted the mic and nodded toward him. Lucas stepped up slowly. His small hands clutched the paper. His legs trembled, but his mother gave him a quiet thumbs up from the front. "Oh." He took a deep breath. "Bravery is being scared, and standing anyway," he said. The room was silent. Then, loud applause, cheers. A few students even stood. Lucas smiled for the first time that day. Later, his teacher pulled him aside. "You inspired the whole school today," she said. "And next week we've been invited to the state assembly. They want you to read that quote to leaders from all over." Lucas blinked. "But I'm just a kid." "Exactly," she said. "And you're teaching all of us." Somewhere across the city, Bradley Turner, once the man in 4A, was sitting with his therapist, something he hadn't done in over 10 years. "I don't want to be that guy anymore," he admitted. "I thought I was powerful, but I was just angry, bitter, disconnected." The therapist nodded slowly. "And now?" "I want to be useful," he said. "I want to help people. I want to build something real." "Why now?" "Because I sat next to a man who had every reason to make me feel small. But instead, he made me want to be better." The therapist smiled. Then let's start. By the end of the week, major news outlets around the world had run the full story. The flight that healed a broken world. Keanu Reeves starts foundation after viral flight moment. The little boy with a big message. Bravery is being scared and standing anyway. People began writing their own stories online. Strangers at airports smiled at one another more. Flight attendants were treated with new respect. Children wrote letters to Lucas. Donations poured into the foundation Keanu started. And kindness, for once, was the top story. And yet, for Keanu, none of this was for attention. It was never about cameras or headlines. It was about restoring faith in simple humanity. And he wasn't done yet. Because while the world celebrated, he was already planning one final act. One that no one asked for. One that no one expected. He picked up his phone and made a quiet call. "Yes, it's Keanu," he said. "I want to schedule a private visit to see someone who never got to see what she made possible. It's for Emily's mother." And on that quiet Sunday morning, he boarded another plane. No cameras, no press, no announcements, just a man in seat 12A, traveling to honor a mother who raised someone brave. Because true kindness doesn't end when the story does. It keeps flying. The flight home. The hospital in upstate New York was small and quiet. Outside, snow had just begun to fall, covering the bare trees and silent roads in a soft white sheet. Inside room 214, Emily's mother lay in a hospital bed, her body weak from treatment but her spirit still warm. She didn't know who was coming. She only knew that her daughter had told her to rest, and that someone wanted to visit and say thank you. Her breath came slow, but her mind was clear. Her eyes flickered toward the window as the sound of soft footsteps approached. Then, a gentle knock. "Come in," she said, her voice no louder than a whisper. The door opened. Keanu Reeves stepped inside, holding a small bouquet of winter roses, their pale petals touched with frost. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She blinked, confused, then tried to sit up. "You're Keanu Reeves," he smiled softly. "Only on good days." She let out a soft laugh that turned into a quiet cough. "Why are you here?" "Because your daughter saved lives," he said, stepping closer. "And you raised her." She tried to hide her tears, but they came quickly. "I don't understand how all of this happened. She called me after the flight. She said something strange had happened. She sounded different." "She was brave," Keanu said. "And because of that, people remembered how to be human again." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket and laid it gently on her bedside table. "That's a letter from the foundation we started. It's in Emily's name. It's already helping others." Her hand reached for his. "Thank you. Not for the money, but for seeing her." "She saw me first," he said quietly. "She saw everyone." He stayed by her side for an hour. He read to her. Told her about the little boy named Lucas. About Bradley, the man who changed. About the award ceremony at Gate 22. About how people around the world were still writing letters because of her daughter. And when he left, she said something he would remember forever. "The world's a little less dark now," she said, "because someone like you remembered to carry a light." He didn't respond. He just smiled. A week later, Emily's mother passed away peacefully, in her sleep. The news was not loud. There were no articles or headlines. Just a quiet message from Emily to Keanu. "Emily. She went in peace. She said she wasn't afraid anymore. Thank you for that." Keanu stared at the message for a long time. Then he sent back a single line. "Keanu, your mother left the light on for others." 3 months passed. The world kept moving. New stories came and went. But the ripple from Flight 7070 never truly faded. Lucas spoke at his school's graduation and was invited to meet the mayor. He wore the same hoodie Keanu had given him and brought the quote in his pocket. Bradley Turner started a new nonprofit for mental health awareness in corporate spaces. His first big event featured a panel of speakers who had never spoken publicly before. One of them was Emily. The foundation Keanu started grew faster than anyone expected. It partnered with airlines, schools, and counseling centers. And quietly, without credit, Keanu funded over 30 scholarships for children of flight attendants. Every now and then, he would hear a stranger at an airport tell a flight attendant, "Hey, thank you for what you do." And sometimes those attendants would smile and say, "We had a flight a while back that reminded people." One sunny afternoon in Los Angeles, Keanu walked through a small bookstore. He liked quiet places, shelves full of unread stories, people not chasing him for photos, just normal life. He found a book of poems and opened it to a random page. The first line read, "Even in the sky, even in silence, kindness speaks louder than thunder." He closed the book and smiled. As he walked toward the register, someone tapped his shoulder. "Mr. Reeves." He turned. A woman stood there, nervous, holding the hand of a small girl. I wanted to say thank you. My husband's a flight attendant. After Flight 770, his whole crew was treated with more respect. Even the passengers changed. People say please and thank you now. It's small, but you did that. Keanu looked down at the little girl. "What's your name?" "Nora," she said shyly. He crouched down. "Nora, can I tell you a secret?" She nodded. "Being kind makes you strong, even stronger than superheroes." She beamed, and that was enough. That night, Keanu sat alone in his home. Outside, the wind blew softly through the trees. He thought about that flight, the coffee, the pain, the chaos, and how something so small, a cup of coffee, a seatbelt click, a scribbled note, had grown into something none of them expected. He closed his eyes and whispered quietly to himself, "Kindness still flies," and he hoped the world would never forget.